All right, here we go, guys. Talking about 9.2. 9.2, as I said in the note to you, the book is going to talk about solving by graphing, and we don't really need to graph. Instead, we're going to do what it says here, and we're going to factor, right? It says in Chapter 7, you solve quadratic equations by factoring. We've already done this. Just want to make sure we understand what a quadratic equation is first. Quadratic equation can be written in that standard form. Ax squared plus bx, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. A cannot be 0 because we need that x squared term, right? We need that x squared term. So we've done this before, okay? We've done factoring before. I just want to point out a couple things on here first. So looking on here, example 1, solving by graphing. So they want you to graph it, and then if we're looking for solutions, remember the solutions are where does it cross the x-axis? Where are my my x-intercepts going to be? So it crosses the x-axis here and here. Those would be my two solutions, -3 and 1. Really, that's all they're asking us to do in here. But they want us to graph, and I really don't think that you want to graph. I don't want you to graph, so we're not going to do that. So, but I do want to flip through a couple of these just to point out something. Up here we had two solutions, right, because it crossed the graph twice. Here we have one solution because it really only touches the x-axis at that one specific point, right, at 4. That's the vertex. That's the one point that that touches the x-axis, so that would be the one solution. But then we also have no solution. And this is one that becomes a little tricky when we go to factor it. It's a little bit easier actually when we graph these. But if you have the graph that's up here, it doesn't touch the x-axis at all. Okay, it doesn't touch the x-axis, which means there's no solution. Remember, the solutions are those x-intercepts. So there is no solution there. So if it doesn't cross the x-axis, there is no solution. That is an option here. You'll notice that they talk about a second method, graphing each side. I don't want you to even worry about that, okay? Just ignore that completely, and things will be a whole lot better for us. So really, we're only going to concentrate on those 3 examples. Actually, sorry, one more example. We're going to look at example 4, finding the zeros of a cubic function. Remember, the cubic function is when there's a x to the third, or it's shaped like this. Just know that something like this, you could have 3 answers, right? It crosses the axis 3 times. They're not going to ask you to actually graph this. They're going to show you the graph, and you're just going to have to pick out those 3 answers. Okay, so instead of graphing, I want to spend this time reviewing how to solve by factoring. Okay, because we are going to factor here. So let's do this. Let's get a whiteboard up here, and let's just talk about factoring for a little bit. So let's say the first one that we have is going to be x squared plus 2x equals 3. And this is example 1 from the book. This is the one that they graphed. But remember, if we're going to solve by factoring, we need to get everything to the same side of the equal sign first. So x squared plus 2x minus 3 is equal to 0 because we subtract that 3 over. And once we're here, now that it's equal to 0, right? Now that it's equal to 0, now I can get my 2 sets of parentheses, and I can do it that way. So you got to find factors of -3 that are going to add up to a +2. So that's going to be, let's see, that's going to be a +3 and a -1. I know that it's a positive and a negative because that term, that -3 here is negative. I know it has to be one of each, and the bigger one has to be positive. So I've got a x plus 3, I've got x minus 1. It's still equal to 0 though. And remember, when we do this, we're using zero product property. So if this whole thing's going to equal 0, either the first part needs to equal 0 or the second part needs to equal 0. So x is equal to -3 or x is equal to 1. Those would be our 2 solutions, just like we saw in the book. So that is how we would factor that. Let's look at something from example 2 here. And remember, example 2 is when we ended up with just one solution. So let's try this one. Let's go x squared minus 8x equals negative 16. So we do this, we get everything to one side. So we have x squared minus 8x plus 16 is equal to 0. And now we factor it. So we get those two sets of parentheses. Factors of positive 16 that add up to negative 8, they're both going to be a negative 4. And since they're both the same, that's when we end up with just one solution, because this is saying x could be equal to 4 or x could be equal to 4, and it's the same thing, so we only have that one solution. And remember, in terms of a graph, when we graphed that, here's 4, our graph looks something like that. Kind of hard to do with just the finger here, but where it would touch just at 4. So we get that one solution there. All right, let's look at that example 3 where we have no solution. I told you this was going to be the kind of tricky one while factoring. This one was negative x squared is equal to 2x plus 4. We always want to get the x squared to be positive. Okay, always get the x squared positive. So technically you could subtract the 2x, subtract the 4, but I want to get the x squared positive. So I'm going to move this one over there. So I'm going to add x squared to both sides, right? Add x squared, add x squared. So what that's going to do, that gives me 0 is equal to x squared plus 2x plus 4. Now I go to factor it, and we've been doing factoring long enough. You know it's factors of 4 that add up to 2. Well, factors of 4, it's 1 and 4 or 2 and 2. Neither of those add up to 2. Since there's no combination that works, there's no combination that works, no possible combination, that means that there is no solution. Okay, and it's a little tricky because you got to make sure that you've tried every combination. Okay, if you just flat out miss a combination, you're going to get it wrong. So you can't just jump straight to no solution. You got to try every combination, right? Write out the combinations. Make sure that you try everything before you just say it's no solution. Okay, we got to make sure of that. So that's what we're going to do here. Okay, you're just factoring zero product property and making sure that you are doing everything or getting both answers or just one answer or no solution depending on the situation. Okay, so again, instead of graphing, we are going to factor here for this one.